The Mass Effect trilogy is probably my favorite series of video games ever made. I just love the universe that surrounds us, full of rich, imaginative backstory and vibrant characters to interact with. But none define the games so much as your squad mates that you can take on any and every mission, who back you up in a fight and offer humorous quips or share heartfelt emotions. People love the Mass Effect squad mates. It's often their favorite aspect of the games. But what if we had different ones? And I don't mean like any scrapped ideas, I mean what if the games went in a different direction and we got to pick from other characters that we already know? Now, I can hear people already, how dare you try and deprive us of our favorite characters, but just chill out. Not every squad mate is great, they gave us Jacob after all. But more importantly, you loved Rex in the first game, right? And then you still went on to love Grunt in Mass Effect 2? So there's plenty of room in your heart for copious amounts of cool and fun space best friends. So looking at the first game, there's honestly not too many choices that would be believable, but that fits because the squad isn't very big in this one anyway with only 6. But I think the obvious change to start out would be to include Jenkins as a full squad mate, not just in the first mission, but the entirety of the game. I doubt the memes of his godhood would be as powerful if that were the case, but a really green recruit like Jenkins could have shown an even better window into the universe as a newcomer, with him being in awe around every corner, or being terrified of things both appropriate and embarrassing, which would be an amazing filter through which to view this world for the first time. That does leave the question of if Kaidan would have died on Eden Prime instead. I'm sure some people wouldn't have minded that, but because Jenkins lacks biotics, it makes a lot more sense for him to replace Ashley. Although you could just transfer the biotics over to her, I guess? But I'm thinking that instead of Vermeer, maybe you would have had to choose between saving Ashley and Kaidan as early as the first mission. That would set the tone of your decisions, creating consequences for the whole game, making you second guess almost everything. Although I also don't see a problem with one of your squad mates just going back to the ship if you pick up Ashley instead, but we'll stick to the 6 number that the original gave us. Now, one of our most plot-critical squad mates is Dr. Liara Tassoni to tell us all about the Protheans and her evil mother that we're fighting against. But what if I told you that the whole game could have been done without her? Yes, I believe that her role could have been potentially filled by Shiala instead. This, of course, is the Asari on Theros that you fight a bunch as a clone. However, she was used to extract the cipher from the Thorian and left as its prisoner. And then it controlled her like a puppet. She believed that following Matriarch Benezia was the right thing to do, and then she was left for dead, giving her the perfect setup for being redeemed and wanting revenge against the main villains. Her relationship may not be as close as a daughter, but she still has a personal connection to make that fight on Noveria just as thrilling. Imagine that awkward conversation, "Hey, I'm not dead after all." However, the double whammy of the cipher and the Thorian could give her just as much knowledge about the Protheans as Liara, and really even more, kind of, because she would actually know about the Reapers.
The Reapers? But I have never heard of...
That would make Shiala the only other person besides Shepard to actually know the scale of the threat that you're up against. Plus, even Liara didn't know where the conduit was until the uncorrupted beacon on Vermeer, so that would be identical for Shiala as well, and yes, she could still be a romance option, as shown by her affection for us in Mass Effect 2, but we'll get there in a minute. So I would actually love this alternate version of events that are similar enough, but still unique to make it feel vastly different than what we know. And really the only other option that I think could work in the first Mass Effect is Captain Kirrahe. First of all, it was quite notable that Solarians were the only major council race to not be given a spot on our team in the first game, so this would rectify that. But secondly, Kirrahe is just a really awesome guy. He can hold the line with the best of them. You and he strike up a wonderful camaraderie pretty immediately, especially if you help to save his life through the Vermeer mission. And that's another great point in his favor. He shows up at the perfect time in the story because one of your squad mates has to die, and it leaves a gaping hole in your already limited selection of team members, but with Kirrahe showing up and completing his task, he could be the perfect fill-in to join your cause right then and there. Maybe even using his technical expertise to help you retake the Normandy after it's grounded on the Citadel. Although that is a good point too, he would probably skew the class availabilities a bit if you had too much tech, but really you're only going to be fighting Geth at this point in the game anyway. But I think that's a small price to pay for him stepping up to complete not only our squad, but our appreciation of all of the major races in our first Mass Effect experience. So those are my recommendations for game number 1, but what about the second entry? Mass Effect 2 started with 10 Squadmates and had 2 for DLC, so it's already doubled in size, but we could go with the opening partner again in Wilson. However, he was a traitor, so that's not a huge loss, although that would mean that Miranda would shoot Jacob instead, and I guess that we could force Wilson into working for us to make up for his betrayal, and a Squadmate openly loyal to Cerberus over you could provide a unique perspective on the organization, but that probably wouldn't turn out so well for us. So instead, I'm gonna say that it would be profoundly interesting if we actually got to keep the original goal of recruiting Okeer to our squad. Yes, I know that Grunt is beloved, but he can be a gift from Okeer in Mass Effect 3 or something. However, a Krogan scientist is fascinating just as a concept, and we don't even really scratch the surface of what it could mean in our brief conversations with him before he died. We were supposed to recruit him because of his dealings with the Collectors, so he could have given us some insight that literally no one else could, either on their inner workings or by tipping us some intel that would lead us to a Collector base or their ship. I could easily see Okeer and Morden having a great relationship, sharing notes on science experiments and collaborating, or they could outright hate each other and think the opposite one is a hack and constantly belittle the other's work. Either version of their pairing would have been great to watch unfold. Actually, maybe Okeer's loyalty mission could be to rescue Grunt's pod or something, and then Okeer could have actually helped Morden cure the genophage in 3 because it was part of his life's work. I think it would have been a wonderful treat to stick with the dossier and actually recruit the Krogan scientist to our squad. I haven't really gone over the classes much, but he could be a nice infiltrator with tech and combat powers to make him a bit unique among the other Krogan, as yet another reason Okeer would have been a brilliant path in the Mass Effect 2 experience. Okay, I said we would get back to it, and I also think that Shiala could be a squadmate in 2 as well, but it wouldn't have to be a carryover from the first game. We could say that we had Shiala in the first game, or Liara could have been on your team like normal in that game. However, since she blows us off on Ilium and Shiala already shows up there in the game to ask for your help, why not take advantage of that and have her join your squad? She's clearly very friendly with us, and it would be incredibly cool to have a familiar character that we've already met be able to hop onto our team in the next game, letting our minds wander as to who else might show up and be a recruit since the last time that we saw them, like how Edie made the jump in Mass Effect 3. So I say the Green Asari easily could have replaced Samara, but I guess maybe they wanted all of the lore in there about Justicars and Ardat Yakshis and everything, so that's probably why Shiala stayed away for a second time. And this one will probably be truly random, but I have always been fascinated by Leah Vael. If you don't know the name, don't feel bad, she's not on screen for very long, but she's the Quarian that clumsy Volus keeps harassing and you gotta go find his credit card for him. But during that whole exchange, Leah comes off surprisingly fleshed out. Maybe that's just the voice actor doing a phenomenal job, but Leah has so much range and subtext in what is actually just a standard side quest. And this is the part of the game where you can't get Tali yet, so I was really itching to get another Quarian back on my ship, and I was quite sad to see her walk away back to the shelter to eat nutrient paste, especially after we had connected over our respect of the Quarian culture. After all, I care deeply for the Quarian people. But hey, if that one doesn't work out for you, I've got another Quarian in my back pocket with Cal Rieger. Talk about great voice actors. Cal is charismatic from the moment you encounter him, throwing quips if Legion is on your team, but also displaying true heroism and loyalty to Tali in rescuing her. And that could still be the way that you recruit him, but instead Tali accompanies the data back to the fleet, and Cal is just a little too injured so he comes on board the Normandy, and then stays with us to learn Cerberus secrets to send back to the fleet. It would just be so cool to have a different breed of Quarian that's more straight combat focused over tech for once. And the beauty of it is that the loyalty mission wouldn't even have to change, because I would totally believe that Rieger would fly all the way to the migrant fleet just to support Tali during her trial, and then go on to kill a bunch of Geth. That's his whole brand. Tali would just have to stay with the admirals because, you know, she's on trial. Honestly, it didn't really make sense for her to go with us in the real game as it is. So really, either of these Quarians would work, but maybe they didn't want to pick Rieger because he would look too similar to Legion at a distance. I don't know. So that's it for 2, but now for Mass Effect 3. The size of your squad dropped pretty dramatically in the early game, but it grows as time goes on, so we'll be addressing that discrepancy as well. Like the last ones, you do start the game with a one-off squad mate. This time it's Admiral Anderson, and as cool as it would be to have him as an option throughout the whole game, I do think that narratively it's more satisfying for him to be leading the resistance forces on Earth and to meet up with him later. So for the first real choice, this may sound pretty odd, but I do think that it would have been a benefit for Brooks to have been on our squad. I know, she turned out to be evil, but that's the point. Her betrayal would have hit so much harder if she had been by our side since Earth or Mars in this game instead of like half an hour at most. And yeah, I know the real reason she wasn't here is that she was a DLC edition, but they've alluded to DLC in the base game before. So if they had fleshed out this idea a bit sooner, it would truly be a shock to have one of your long-serving squad mates be a Cerberus plant, and it would make the twist all the better once you finally undertake that Citadel mission. Of course, doing it at your leisure would mean that you would lose a squad mate at a random time in the story instead of a priority mission. Now, honestly, one of the things that bugs me the most about all of Mass Effect 3 is that none of your squad mates from 2 are eligible to use in this game. I mean, except for the ones that were already repeats from Mass Effect 1, with Garrus and Tali constantly having your back, but seriously, none of the dozen characters from the last game could have worked in this one? I know that some people say they all had good story reasons for not being with Shepard, but guess what? People wrote the story, so they could have written it differently. Miranda or Kasumi could have easily been written to be on the Normandy, but they just weren't. However, worst of all of them to me is Thane. Your Drell squad mate is just chilling out at the start of the game. Sure, he's talking with his son or whatever, but he's mostly just resting from his disease. Now yes, that was firmly established already in Mass Effect 2, but in that game, he says Keprel syndrome will not affect his abilities to fight, and then he shows you that's true. So it's just the writing in this game that made him say that he wasn't good enough anymore. But then he also goes toe-to-toe with Kai Lang, so apparently he was lying. I see no reason why Thane couldn't have joined you right near the start of the game when you only have 4 or 5 squad mates anyway, and help you out until the Cerberus coup attempt on the Citadel and he would still die there. It would be a scripted squad mate death like the one on Vermeer, but this time you don't get a choice. Or I guess your choice would have been made a long time ago if Thane died in 2. But hey, I guess that means that Kirrahe could get promoted back to a full squad mate for the first half of this game instead. Although that is a good point too, we could have also had any of the dead character inserts as squad mates, I suppose, like Paddock Wicks or Reeve or anyone else, except it would be like a prize for doing well, as they could only join your squad if the original was still alive. But if you let the old ones die before 3, these replacement characters would have more important things to do. That would be pretty neat, but it doesn't solve the issue of the second game squad abandoning you. It's frankly embarrassing that no squad mates from 2 bothered to join up with us in 3. So we need to see at least one of them, and it would just fit too well to have Thane join in and help us in the early game when he's already most active in this story anyway, and when we're missing a few squad mates as it is. Plus, that way we would get super attached to him again, just to have the gut punch of him getting taken away. So it heightens the existing story as well. But no, somebody stupid couldn't conceive of a sick guy doing cool things, even though we've seen him do it, and he's an alien so he wouldn't have to be constrained by human limitations. There's just a staggering lack of imagination on display here. But if it couldn't be Thane, we couldn't have even gotten something like Zaid at the very least, and I don't even like Zaid. However, there is one more character that I think would have made an excellent squad mate if only given the chance, and that is the Solarian Spectre, Jondam Bao. This pleasant fellow accompanies you on a side quest in his attempt to apprehend Kasumi, but he's not malicious about it, he actually respects her work. But she did do crime, so he's gotta bring her in. Jondam is a refreshing boost of optimism, insisting that the rule of law can indeed see us through this Reaper war, and I think he would have been a great addition to the squad. Now, you might say, Jondam is already a Spectre, so it wouldn't make sense for him to join your squad, and I could see that. Spectres are valuable, and you don't want to waste multiple Spectres in one spot, especially in wartime. You can't afford to lose 2 Spectres on the same ship after all, right? Well, I could see that, except for that later in this very game, we see the Vermeer survivor join up with you after they've already been sworn in as a full-blown Spectre. So apparently the Council doesn't have any problem with it, as Spectres seem to enjoy the same autonomy that they've always been given. So if Jondam Bao decides that his skills would best serve the war on the Normandy with us, that's his prerogative. We would just have to make sure that he doesn't find out about Kasumi helping us too. Nobody's perfect. There are plenty of other beloved characters across the Mass Effect games, but not all of them would be suited to become a squad mate. Like, we probably couldn't just take the Rachni Queen out shopping with us on Ilium. But which characters would you have most liked to see as full-blown squad mates across the trilogy? And let me know why it should be an L-Core, because you know that would be awesome. Anyway, I should go.